And I agree that my grandfather died at 98, transitioned back to the non-physical, and his quote was, always maintain a keen sense of the ridiculous. So I always keep a sticky note right here that reminds me, you're ridiculous. So it just reminds me that I am ridiculous. And then I don't take myself too seriously. And the thing is, the more you get your needs met, the more happy you are, the more choices you make, the more forgiveness, or I don't even think forgiveness is the right word, because forgiveness implies something different. The more compassion and kindness and lightheartedness you have, the happier you'll be. The happier you are, the more happiness you'll spread to others. And even when things that are quote unquote bad happen, you just won't mind. People think that sometimes my life is perfect, or maybe your life is perfect. And, they're like, you're happy. And I said, well, I'm happy most of the time, but it doesn't mean that nothing unpleasant happens to me. I just don't mind very much when it happens. I make mistakes all the time. That's how I learn. I know how to do what I do because I failed at it 336, 336 times. And that's why I'm better at it. Somebody who's not willing to try and not willing to fail, or doesn't give themselves the room to make experiences, is going to get stuck at whatever level they're at, which is probably just not as much fun.
One of the main fears that creates problems for people is that when they don't know what to do and they're not sure of themselves, particularly if they don't like themselves or don't feel real competent, then they pick a strategy to deal with that. And strategy is called, if I don't play, I can't lose. So they stay on the outside. They don't get involved. They go to the back of the room and just wait and watch. They don't get connected, because if they don't play, they can't lose. If they don't get involved and don't get connected and don't get drawn into this, then they can't lose if they just stay on the outside. But the fact is that if you don't play, you always lose.
Mm-hmm.
You can't win if you don't play.
That's true.
So that is not a good answer to say, well, I don't want to make mistakes, so I just won't make many choices. I'll just stay out on the outside. I won't join. I won't get into any more romantic relationships. I won't, do this or do that, because there's always heartache and there's problems at the end of it, and it never seems to work out. So I just won't play.
Mm-hmm.
That is a terrible choice. You're taking yourself out of the opportunities for growth, which means you'll just sit out there on the sidelines, learning nothing, being unhappy, and mostly degenerating. So that's a trap. Don't try that.
I definitely tried that strategy when I was younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of people try that strategy. It's a very popular strategy.
It is.
When something goes wrong and you don't like it, you just back out and say, well, I'm not going to get caught in that anymore. I'm just not going to play in that game. And you withdraw and you refuse to go there. And that is a big mistake. It's a trap to get in. If you don't play, you always lose.
Mm-hmm.
You lose the opportunity to grow and to learn by not connecting and not interacting. A lot of people feel that way about relationship. They're afraid of relationship, afraid that it's going to go bad. This is too good to be true. And because of that, they pull themselves out. They don't dig in deep to that relationship. They keep it very shallow and so on, because they're afraid of where it might go. That fear is what drives relationships to dysfunctional ends.
Yeah.
It's the refusal to play, refusal to get in there and just mix it up. And yes, it might be painful. It might work out poorly, but it might work out wonderfully too.
Yeah.
But however it works out, you'll learn something. You'll come out the other end a better person. And when you don't play, you just stay the same. You don't have any growth potential. And that will make you very unhappy, more unhappy than if you play and lose.
Yeah.
At least if you lose, you can find out why and make choices better and learn from it. Don't be afraid to lose. Don't be afraid for things to go wrong. Just get into them, have a positive attitude, and accept whatever happens is what happens. And if that blows up, well, then you have another adventure waiting for you right after that. So you have this positive attitude, and that will take you very far. Not the negative attitude, uh-oh, this is scary. I wonder where this is going. Trying to assess the future. Let the future unfold as it does and learn from it. Don't try to force the future to unfold the way you want it to. That will just make everything worse.
And it's giving yourself a lot of credit too, that there's things that work way above our pay grade that have kind of a better overview of the system than my ego. I always remind myself there's way above my pay grade. And I think, especially when speaking to men, one of the things that I see from them with relationships is being afraid. I think sometimes it's being afraid to be vulnerable and be open in a relationship, but sometimes it's also just complete lack of awareness of what they want. Getting back to our initial topic of they don't know what they want. They don't know what they need. Those things are unfamiliar to them. Nobody has modeled that to them. So I think sometimes they're afraid, and sometimes it's just unfamiliar. They have nobody modeling that to them. So they could definitely be afraid of intimacy or afraid of making mistakes, because men are also told, you have to be the best, survival of the fittest. You can't be a failure. But then also putting them in relationships where they're afraid to be vulnerable. Yes, but also just completely unaware of what that looks like, because it's not something they've ever seen. It's not something they've ever been taught. It's not something they've ever experienced. So then they might sort of get frozen from making choices. And it could be from fear, or sometimes I think it can be also just from complete, I don't mean ignorance in a negative sense, but they don't know.
Yes, well, one of the big mistakes that men tend to make, some women do too, but I think more men do, is that they lead their life with their intellect. They have to figure everything out in their head. It all has to make logical sense, or they can't go there. And most of life does not make logical sense. Life is not logical. Relationships are not logical. All of the things that really matter to you are not logical. The things that are logical is how the car works. Why rocks fall down, roll downhill and not uphill. There's a few things like that yes, your intellect can work with those, but interactions with people, they are not logical at all. People are not logical. People are mostly driven by their fears, their egos, and their beliefs. So you have to lead with your feelings and let the logic come along behind and try to find the lessons. But if you try to lead with your intellect, you'll just stew, and it's like a dog chasing its tail. You'll never go anywhere, because you'll never be able to come to a logical deduction about whether you should marry Sally or marry Sue. It's not a logic problem. You don't have enough information. Should I take this job or that job? Should I tell my boss about this problem, or should I just be quiet? You have all these things, and you try to analyze it, and you can't come to any conclusion, because it's not logical to begin with. It's just people. And live life with your feelings. Feel your way through things. What feels right? What seems right? Live your life out of your intuitive side, and then have the intellect come along and kind of mop up the after actions, if you like. Kind of look at why didn't that work out? What should I learn from that encounter? But don't try to lead with the intellect. If you do, you're just going to confuse yourself and probably make a poor choice, because the only choice you have will be a guess. You're taking a wild guess. Well, I think it's maybe going to be like this, that gut thing. And if you're not really good with your intuition, that guess is as highly likely to be wrong as it is to be right. So working with guesses is a bad idea. If you lead with your intuition and with your feelings, you'll find that eventually you'll get good at that. And they will be more accurate and more helpful to you than that intellect ever was when you're dealing with non-rational things like relationships.
Mm.
Relationships aren't rational because it's an interplay of two people's fears and two people's attitudes and two people's beliefs and two people's egos. It's all that interacting. None of that's logical,
No.
you know? So being afraid of a relationship because you can't figure out all the logical consequences of everything is just, just imagine a puppy chasing its tail. You work at it and you work at it and you drive yourself, into the ground, and you end up with just making a wild guess anyway that is probably not going to be right. Better to let your feelings tell you. I know a lot of men will have problems with that because
Yeah.
they don't deal in the feeling world very much. But you can learn it. You can gain those skills. You've always been told throughout your life that your ability to reason and think, that's what'll get you through. That's what's important. That'll solve all your problems. But you find out that doesn't solve all your problems because most of your problems are not logic problems. They're problems, with people, and people are not logical.
No.
So that's another point where I think the guys mostly get messed up. They want to think everything through, and they can't come up with logical answers, and that's frustrating. So they don't know what to do because if they can't come up with a logical answer, then there is no answer. But
Right.
there's often answers in the feeling space. Instead of, what's the right thing to do, what's the thing that'll make everybody happy? What's the thing that will reduce the tensions? What's the thing that will move everything in a positive direction where everybody wins?
Yeah.
And you can feel that. You don't have to make that a logic. You can just get the sense of how that would work out. And then do that thing. Do that thing where it lessens the tensions and everybody wins. What would that be? You see, now that's not a logical problem as much as a feeling problem. Well, okay, I'm gonna do something differently. I'm gonna make sure that everything ends up positive,
Yeah.
not negative. So whatever it is it takes to create a positive outcome, that's probably the best answer,
Yeah.
even if you don't have the logic. It's that creating the positive outcome is going to be a way for you to figure out what is the right answer.
Yeah.
And you may say, well, all right, my wife's been really nasty to me, but I could just apologize and bring her some flowers and be nice to her and take her out to dinner next Saturday and see if that helps. It might. It might not, but you'll learn something, but just figure out what works and apply it and then learn from it. That's the way to go forward, not get bottled up in an intellectual problem that cannot be solved logically.
Yes, and I think there's a couple of perceived barriers that a lot of my clients have expressed, which is that a couple of things. One thing that they have shared with me, and one thing that I've noticed. So one thing that they often share is that they don't know what they're feeling. A lot of men have had to shut down their emotional navigation system. Another
Mhm.
barrier is that I think at some point in people's journeys, it can be hard to differentiate between the feelings, desire, and what feels right that's authentically aligned to you versus what is familiar. Like people that are
Mhm.
used to abuse and assault and trauma will get around somebody who's going to invalidate them or not appreciate him, and he's going to feel right about going into a relationship with her, or they'll say, oh, I'm following my intuition. My intuition is telling me to quit my job, leave my family, and go travel around Belize and study monkeys. I don't know. So I think the questions are, how does a man learn to identify his own feelings, and how does he tell the authentic feelings from the familiar trauma patterns? Or people are often attracted to other people that are familiar, not necessarily
Mhm.
what's actually going to make them feel good long term.
Yeah. Well, what passes as feelings are often generated by, shall we say, misunderstandings, generated by what the person would like to have happen, what they want to do. Some of it's generated by the self-centeredness. You have to, when you use your intuition, it's not guessing. It's opening yourself up as much as you can to the bigger picture and just feeling the connectedness between things and seeing if you can't see it from a higher level. You know, Einstein made this statement about you can't solve a problem from the same level from which the problem exists. You have to get above that level where the problem exists in order to solve the problem and see it. Well, that's kind of what I'm talking about. You know, that's where the intuition comes into play. It can take you above the level of where the problem was created so that you can actually see a solution to it. And one of the answers that you're very likely to get is that you are part of the problem. You know, you're not necessarily the whole problem, but you're a part of the problem. And just seeing that perspective can help tremendously to solve the problem. So getting that unbiased look from the bigger picture is what your intuition can provide for you. But don't confuse intuition just with feelings. That's a lot of feelings are guided by your fear. Your feelings are guided by your ego. They're defined by your beliefs.
Yes.
And now you're making your choices based on things that are all negatives. And you almost certainly will end up with a poor choice. So if you just look at things and say, what would help solve the problem? What could I do? How could I be to make this problem better? And give all the possibilities there. I could admit that, you know, I'm intransigent and, you know, refuse to, you know, to work with other people and do what they want. You know, I always have to have my way. And that seems to be the problem here. You know, people are pushing back about my way. Well, you have to get to a point above where your ego and your fears are in order to see that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you'll never see it. You'll be blind to it, completely blind to it. So it's an old Pogo strip. That was a comic strip a long time ago. And the end of this particular strip was that we have seen the enemy and they are us. You know, that's the way it works most of the time. You'll find out that, you know, you can only change you. So what can I do differently that'll make the outcome be differently? Not what do other people have to do to make the outcome come out the way I want it. See, that always ends in failure. But it's what can I do differently that'll make the outcome be better, given all the people that are involved and how those people are. Well, then go do that thing, even if that means you're going to have to, what do they say, eat some crow, you know, whether you're going to, you know, give up some of what you know is the right way. You're just going to have to let it be the way that it is. Other people are involved, and you know, your way's not always the right way or the only way. There may be 10 ways that are all about equally good, but you're only aware of one of them. So anyway, that's what the intuition will deliver to the problem. It'll deliver these higher level viewpoints that you have where you actually just see yourself as an actor, not as the one who is right, but as just an actor in a bigger problem. And say, well, what could I possibly do that would make all this better? Maybe I should just acquiesce and do it Jane's way. That would solve the problem. Well, then what's the downside of that? And if you really are honest with yourself, there's probably very little downside with that. Oh, it wouldn't be as optimal as my way. Yeah, well, so what? What does that cause? What's the lack of optimization? What's the result of that? You know, is that going to be a really, really big problem? Or is it mostly your ego that's, you know, involved? It's the kind of thinking you have to do. But if all you do is come out with your intellect, try to solve the problem intellectually, you'll just confuse yourself and you'll probably come up with a very poor choice. You have to get in deeper. You have to see it from a bigger perspective. And none of that is intellectual. Seeing it from that bigger perspective is not an intellectual thing
No.
to do. It's a thing that you do in feeling space. It's a thing that you do while you're meditating. It's a thing that you do when your mind is clear. And that is a kind of a way out of a difficult, intractable situation. What could I do to make everything flow again? And all right, it might not be as good as if it went my way, but would it still be okay? Would the world still turn and everybody would still get along and life would go on? Then let it be suboptimal. So what? If you really knew the truth, your way was also probably suboptimal from some perspective. It depends on the perspective. So let people do it their own way, not the way that you know is the best way. That's another good lesson, to let people express their free will and how they want to do things, and you just go along with it. You don't have to fix it. A lot of things aren't broken that you try to fix. A lot of things would just go on. Even if you weren't there, they just keep on going on and they'd be just fine, But you insert yourself and feel like, you have to fix it. Well, that's a thing that gets in the way more often than it's helpful.
Yeah.
That's ego.
And yeah, I suppose. So then it's something that I have a hard time reverse engineering, because it's something that's very natural to me to zoom out, zoom in. And even my husband, he says, how do you do that? I just look at things from every single person in a situation's perspective. But I struggle to explain that to people, of to like how to start that or how to start connecting to their intuition. I'm very strongly connected to my intuition. So then I'll talk to a client about, the difference between thinking and feeling and zooming out and metacognition. And sometimes I'll hear something, this is an exaggeration, but it gets the point across, something like, oh, I've been listening to my intuition, Sandy, and it told me that I should be going out with my friends on the weekend and that I should definitely gamble on the horse races or something. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's your intuition talking. Like, so then they really they say things to me that I'm like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. But then I don't want to tell them what their intuition says. But like, how do people differentiate between their intuition, their ego, their fear, and their traumas?
Well, the way you differentiate is by trial and error. That's called growth.
That's
You
fair.
just do stuff and you see how it comes out. And if the stuff you do is like, well, I'll start from the assumption that I'm always right and my idea is always best. All right, that's an assumption. Now I'm going to start living life that way and see how that works out. And then you make an assumption, say, well, I'm going to make the assumption that other people's ideas, even if it's not what I would do, it'll still be okay. Life won't end. Terrible things won't happen. We'll get by. And I'll just let other people, do it the way they want to, at least some of the time, and see how that works out. So it's trial and error. That's life. That's learning. There isn't any easy way to solve those kinds of problems. You just have to make your best choice. Learn from it. And if you go into problem solving with, well, how am I going to get all these people to see it my way? And that's your idea of problem solving, you just become part of the problem. You're not solving anything.
No.
You just become part of the problem. And if there's somebody here that has some idea and you think it's a goofy idea, but other people like it, well, then go with it. Say, okay, if that's what you think, well, just go with that instead of fighting it and fighting it and fighting it. And then if it turns out badly, just like you thought, well, they'll all learn something. And next time, it'll all be better. Give them an opportunity to learn from their bad choices. Don't feel like you have to save everybody from their bad choices. You see, let people learn from their bad choices. So just letting the thing go is often a good answer when you can't convince other people that your way's a better way, then let it go. If it turns out that it falls on its face, well, that's good. It's okay. They will learn. Say, well, that fell on its face just like I thought it would. But you don't tell people, aha, I told you so. That's not good. They'll realize it. they'll realize it. And you just have to let life unfold the way it does. You can't be the boss and fix everything.
Yeah.
Let other people have their way. It will work. They'll learn, you'll learn, and everybody will be better off. But but I know that isn't going to work. That's a bad idea. So I'm going to fight and fight and fight and fight. And all the dysfunction you cause with that fight and fight and fight isn't worth it, because you keep people from learning.
Yeah.
All these people you're working with, they have to learn from their mistakes too. You have to let them make mistakes or they can't learn.
Definitely.
So be gracious with, your omniscience and always being right, because everybody thinks that they're right. Every side of every issue, of every argument, the people in it all think that they have the better way.
Yeah.
Well, let that, sometimes you can fight for your way, but you have to know when to quit. When you trying to help is actually not helping. And then you just keep your mouth shut and let it unfold however it unfolds. Not fight to the death for every issue.
Yeah.
That's an ego issue. People want to be seen as the one who got the right answer. But better to let it play out. So trial and error is how you learn from everything. You make choices, you see how they work out. That's the only way. You can't get it in a book. A book will give you intellectual knowledge, but it won't give you wisdom.
No.
You can learn a lot of facts, but you won't learn facts about how to deal with people, because people aren't rational. You can't deal with people with facts. You got to deal with people because they have fears, they have emotions, they have ego, they have beliefs, and you have to deal with all that in a positive way. And the idea that I know best and I'm trying to try to help you see the right answer, and that's generally not a good thing to push. It's not bad to start with that. You can say, hey, here's my opinion, but if that doesn't seem to be catching on, then just be quiet and let it go wherever it goes. Everybody will learn, including you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think sometimes, I don't think that there's ever one way to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think. I think I'm always like, well, you could do this, you could do that, or you could do something else I haven't thought of yet. Here's 10 options. Pick one. I think, I'm a big fan of having your own cause and effect, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, you can actually gain credibility, let's say, in an office environment by telling people, saying, well, if we do it that way, I think this and this will happen. And if we do it this other way, I think this will happen. And I think the best way to do it's like this. But then letting it go however it goes. And if it turns out that what you said is what happens, now you don't have to tell them so. Oh, I told you so. That'll just make them annoyed with you. But if you don't say anything, eventually they'll realize that you're the one that gets the right answers. And when something comes up, they'll ask you. And they'll tend to go with your answer because you have a good record of getting good answers. But the way you do that is to let other people fail, let them see the results. You can point out what you think, but then let it go. What people have is they point it out and then they want to fight to the death to get their idea there. And that's false. You'll do a lot better. And people will start seeing that you're the one with the right answers because you explained it. And sure enough, that's the way it came out. And that's how you get leverage, not by browbeating everyone to agree with you. That just makes you a jerk. And people don't like that. And they won't take your idea even if they know it's the best idea because they just can't stand to do whatever it is that you say. So it's better to let people learn through the trial and error. And if you tend to be right, then it'll show. And if you don't tend to be right, then that'll show too. And everybody will learn something. So the thinking of how can I help all of this turn out to be positive? And sometimes the answer is just by keeping my mouth shut. That's the way I can help all of this, turn out to be more positive. But you have to grow up to be able to find that solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to grow up to find a solution, but you can't grow up until you find the solution. It's chicken and an egg problem.
Chicken
But
egg.
it all evolves together. You just let life happen and you learn, you grow, you gain wisdom. And when you do, people come to you for answers. They come to you for suggestions. And you never tell them what to do.
Mm-mm.
All you tell them is what the probabilities and possibilities are, and you let them go make their own decision.
Mm-hmm.